In the quiet town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, history seems to hang in the air like a heavy mist. The streets are lined with old buildings, many of which were once homes, hospitals, or command posts during the Civil War. The town is serene, yet it carries with it a lingering presence of something else, something not quite of this world. Marcus had always been fascinated by history, particularly the Civil War, and the Battle of Gettysburg stood out as one of the most pivotal moments in American history. Every year, tourists and Civil War enthusiasts like him flock to this small town, eager to walk the grounds where more than 50,000 soldiers fought and died over 3 brutal days in July 1863. But for some, like Marcus, Gettysburg offered more than just a look into the past. It offered a glimpse into the paranormal. Marcus had read countless stories about the ghosts that haunt the fields and woods around Gettysburg. There were tales of soldiers seen walking the grounds at dusk, spectral figures at Devil's Den, and ghostly voices calling out at night from the ridges and ravines where men once fought and fell. For years, these stories lingered in his mind, and now he was about to see if they were true. Accompanied by 3 close friends, Sarah, Jason, and Anna, Marcus arrived in Gettysburg late one summer evening, just as the sun was setting. The shadows stretched long across the streets, and the golden light bathed the fields where so much blood had been spilled. They were all excited, but there was an undercurrent of nervous anticipation. They had come for a ghost tour, hoping to encounter something unexplainable, something that would make the hair on the back of their necks stand on end. Their guide, a local named Tom, was a grizzled man in his late 50s. He had lived in Gettysburg his whole life and had seen more than his fair share of strange things. He led the group toward Devil's Den, a place infamous for paranormal activity. "This place is a hotspot for ghost sightings," Tom explained as they approached the massive boulders that form the den. "People have seen soldiers standing here as if they're still waiting for orders. Some even say they hear gunfire, footsteps, and voices like the battle is still raging. The air was cooler here, and the wind seemed to whistle through the rocks in a way that made the entire area feel alive." As Marcus and his friends walked through the den, the atmosphere shifted. The cheerful excitement they'd felt earlier was replaced by a sense of unease. The boulders, stacked haphazardly as if by some ancient force, seemed to close in around them. Suddenly Sarah, who had been walking a few paces ahead, stopped dead in her tracks. She turned slowly toward the group, her face pale. "Do you see that?" she whispered, pointing toward a figure standing in the distance. At first it was hard to make out what she was talking about, but then Marcus saw it too. A man, dressed in a Confederate uniform, standing motionless on a rock, staring into the distance. His features were obscured by the dim light, but his presence was undeniable. He stood perfectly still, as if unaware of their presence. Tom, the guide, didn't seem surprised. "That's one of them," he said quietly. "They call him the Sentinel. He's been spotted here for decades, always in the same spot, always looking out like he's still on duty." The group watched in stunned silence as the figure remained unmoving. Marcus slowly raised his camera, hoping to capture the image. His hands trembled as he snapped a few photos, the flash briefly lighting up the darkening landscape. The figure didn't move. For a few minutes it was as if time stood still, and the group was transported back to that fateful summer in 1863. They were no longer tourists, they were witnesses to history. Suddenly the air grew colder, and a dense fog began to roll in from the woods. It moved quickly, covering the battlefield in a blanket of mist. The figure of the soldier seemed to dissolve into the fog, as if he had never been there at all. "That's when you know they're nearby," Tom said in a low voice. "The fog, it always comes when they're around." The group stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. The fog thickened, and soon they couldn't see more than a few feet in front of them. The only sound was the wind whipping through the trees and the soft crunch of their footsteps on the gravel path. Suddenly Jason, who had been standing at the back of the group, let out a gasp. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice shaky. Everyone stopped and listened. At first, there was nothing but the wind. Then faintly they heard it, the distant sound of gunfire. It was faint, almost like an echo from another time. Then, there were voices, shouts, orders being barked in the heat of battle. But the battlefield was empty. Marcus's heart raced as the sounds grew louder. It was as if the battle was playing out around them, invisible but very real. The group huddled together, their breaths coming in short, panicked gasps. The sounds of the battle seemed to surround them: gunshots, cannon fire, the clash of swords, and the cries of wounded men. It was overwhelming, and for a moment, Marcus felt like he was there, in the middle of the chaos. He could almost see the soldiers fighting in the mist, their faces twisted in fear and pain. Then, as quickly as it had started, the sound stopped. The fog began to lift, and the battlefield was once again silent. The group stood in stunned silence, unsure of what they had just experienced. Had it been real, or had their minds played tricks on them? Tom, who had seen this kind of thing before, broke the silence. "The battle never really ended here," he said quietly. "It's still going on, even if we can't see it. The soldiers who died here, they're stuck, trapped in the moment of their death. And sometimes, we can hear them." The group, still shaken, decided to head back to town. But as they walked away from Devil's Den, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He turned back once, just in time to see a figure standing on the rocks again, this time, a Union soldier. He blinked, and the figure was gone. Back in town, they gathered at a small diner, too rattled to sleep. They reviewed the photos Marcus had taken, but there was nothing, no soldier, no mist. It was as if their encounter had never happened. But they knew what they had seen. And as they left Gettysburg the next morning, they couldn't help but feel that the town's ghosts had left their mark on them. The past, they realized, is never truly gone. It lingers just beneath the surface, waiting for someone to notice.